Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on our 15th anniversary York Natural Health meditation event. So this is the final evening, and hopefully I've got some interesting insights in store for you tonight. And the topic for my talk tonight and meditation is breathing and how to reduce stress. Reduce your stress through breathing. Now, the very idea of not breathing would obviously cause most people a lot of stress, and I know there's been a lot of people that have struggled with their breathing over the last couple of years, and funnily enough, most people, when they do get stressed, actually do stop breathing. So it's kind of a little bit ironic that if we could just be mindful of our breathing when we're going through those stressful periods, we could actually reduce our stress experience quite considerably. So I thought we'd start with just identifying how well you actually breathe. So if this actually works, then we should be able to have a little bit of a minute countdown. And I'd like you to start by just putting one hand on your chest, one hand on your tummy, and just seeing if you can count the breaths you take. So the idea is that in and out is one breath. So there we go. So basically, I'm just going to start this little counter, and over 60 seconds, count how many breaths you take. If you write down the number or just mentally remember how many breaths you took over the course of that minute, and we'll check it again at the end. So if you want to share in the chat box how many breaths you took in that time, you can do. The basis of this lecture is based on the Buteyk method, which was devised by Professor Konstantin Buteyk, and he noticed that people who had chronic illness tended to hyperventilate or breathe too much. So by slowing down the patient's breathing, he found that their health improved. And he treated asthmatic children in Moscow in the 1980s, and that led to the Buteyk method being adopted by the state medical system. So just to give you a bit of background on breathing, we've obviously got the lungs, and within those lungs we have the trachea coming into the bronchi, and then we have the alveolar sacs where that oxygen exchange happens, and the oxygen is, well, the air is coming in, oxygen goes into the blood vessels, into the little capillary beds, and carbon dioxide is exchanged out and then breathed out. So that's a diagram of how that's happening. So we're getting deoxygenated blood coming in, and the CO2 is diffusing out, and the oxygen is diffusing in, and then that's going back to the heart to be then pumped around the whole body. Now, one of the interesting things about breathing is that it's very linked to what's called the autonomic nervous system and our fight and flight response. And that's very beneficial because obviously if we're under stress and we need to run away from something to gain our safety, then by breathing more, we're going to oxygenate our tissues better, we're going to get the oxygen into the muscles so that we can run away. But most health conditions are related to some kind of stress response, and it will change how the body functions. So when we're in that fight and flight state, our heart rate increases, our breathing rate increases, and our digestive process shuts down, and our eliminatory functions also reduce. So immediately we're storing waste in our tissues, which leads to discomfort and acid buildup in the tissues, and can lead to a whole host of different symptom pictures arising, depending on where we hold that tension in our body. And the idea is that when you breathe slower, you can actually actively calm that fight and flight nervous system down, which is coming out of the spinal cord and runs just in front of the ribs where they attach the spine in the back. So if you imagine deep inside of your chest, at the back of your thoracic cavity, that's where the chain of nerves is. So that can often mean that we can also have tension in that area of our back when we're in that fight and flight response. So if you went for a massage or if you had osteopathy, by relaxing those muscles down, then you would also have an effect on reducing the fight and flight response. But the way that we're dealing with it for today's purposes through the breath is something that you can do anywhere, anytime, and is accessible to everybody. So Buteyk breathing focuses on nose breathing, slow breathing, and breathing 6 breaths a minute. Now, I don't know how many breaths you calculated you breathed, but if you gain an idea of where you are compared to what would be an ideal, according to Buteyk and his studies, then we have an idea of where we need to move to. And also focusing on diaphragm breathing, which means that we're not breathing so much up here, which we tend to do a lot when we're perhaps talking or when we're in a stress response. We're actually breathing more into our bellies using our diaphragm. And we also use something called a control pause, which I'll go into in a bit more detail later. So Buteyk identifies something called chronic hidden hyperventilation, and that means breathing a little bit too much all the time, but not very noticeably. So it's hidden because it's not obvious that you're hyperventilating. It's not like you're panting away. You're basically just breathing a little bit too rapidly all the time. And then that reduces the CO2 in the body because we're blowing more CO2 out. And the lower the CO2 in the body, the poorer the oxygenation. So basically the red blood cells that circulate around our vessels are really clever. They let go of oxygen where there are high levels of CO2. Now, CO2 is made when oxygen and glucose join together in the muscle tissues or the tissues of the body, and oxygen plus glucose forms energy, and that's what we use to move and for all the cellular activity. And the CO2 is that byproduct. So if you're using your muscle more and you're creating a lot of CO2, then the body, the red blood cells know to drop the oxygen in the area of high CO2. So it's a really clever design. It just switches and picks up the CO2 and then carries it away. But if we've breathed out all that CO2, then the red blood cells could be attached to oxygen, but not know to drop it because there isn't enough background CO2 in the body. That's based on the Bohr effect. So breathe more to oxygenate more. Actually, we need to breathe less to oxygenate more effectively. Obviously, if you're exercising, you'll need to breathe more deeply and more fully because it is good to get a good lung volume in then. But generally speaking, we could be breathing more efficiently and more effectively more of the time to keep that fight and flight nervous system relaxed and to keep our CO2 balance at an optimal 6%. So overbreathing has been linked with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, anxiety and panic, chest pain, heart problems, blood pressure problems, diabetes, thyroid disorders, digestive disturbance, headaches, migraines, and even epilepsy. So if you think of all the things that we can have an effect on in our body just by slowing our breathing down and retraining it, and of course asthma. And obviously asthma has been more focused on with Buteyk because it's a breathing disorder and it's fairly easy to see some rapid progress with the exercises. And because breathing is a behavior, it can be retrained. And it's actually one of the easier behaviors to retrain because it only takes about 4 weeks to create a new habit pattern in the body if it's repeated every day. So hyperventilation and anxiety. Irregular breathing has been shown to accompany anxiety states. And this could be in the breath rate or volume or the CO2 level. So whether we're breathing too fast, too big a breath, or whether we've blown out the CO2. And with anxiety, we're often bringing that imagined future into the present and the body's reacting to it. So depression states can be very backward looking into the past, where anxiety is more forward looking and worrying about the future. And obviously, if our body is anticipating an event, then our breathing will pick up in response to that. So if we're more mindful of what we're doing with our breath, then we can gain more control and relaxation. I found this image that I'm going to show you next really interesting. So they basically did a scan of the brain, and they showed what happened after 1 minute of voluntary hyperventilation. So the shot on the left is the brain with good oxygen perfusion, so good blood flow. And after 1 minute of hyperventilation, it changed this rather dull looking brain, which you can imagine how that might affect how you feel, how you think, maybe your mood. And the primitive brain centers are activating the fight and flight. So when we lose that higher cognitive function, we go more into our primitive reactive brain. So we're more emotional, and we're not able to consciously choose how we respond to situations as well. And they found that even in healthy subjects, emotional memory was activated when breathlessness was induced. So just by any normal healthy person breathing too much and getting a bit breathless, they can get more emotionally reactive. So it isn't something that's wrong with you, it's just a case of making sure that you're breathing in the optimal way for your best health. So the benefits of nose breathing is that it warms and filters the air. It creates a nice smooth laminar flow down into the lungs, so the air is not going in all chaotically. And it also produces something called nitrous oxide, which is a potent vasodilator. That means it opens up the blood vessels. That's what things like Viagra do to help blood flow for men in certain areas of the body. So, you know, there's multiple benefits across the board, but it certainly is something that is also used in angina, where people have the angina spray, and that's also opening blood vessels in the heart. So nose breathing is good regardless, for all different manner of reasons. So the best way to make sure that your nose is clear, because some people find it quite difficult to breathe through the nose, especially if they're quite mucousy, is to do the nip and nod technique. So you breathe in through your nose and out through your nose, and then you would nip your nose and nod 3 to 4 times. So as long as you don't have any neck issues, if you want to join in with me, so breathe into through your nose, breathe out through your nose, hold your nose and nod 2 or 3 times. Have a couple of recovery breaths, and then we'll just repeat that again, just to make sure we're getting nice and clear. That's it. And you can check to see how your nostrils are doing by closing one nostril at a time and blowing out through the nostril. And if you've still got a bit of blockage, you can repeat that. So breath in through the nose, out through the nose, and nod 3 to 4 times. So we do that about 4 to 6 times, depending on how congested the nose is. So if you need to do it a couple more times until you get your nostrils nice and clear, that would be great. So slow breathing is the other thing that we use, and that's just retraining the breathing to have a sort of slower rate. So there's various different patterns that we can do. To begin with, it might be breathing in for 2, out for 2, and pause for a second, in for 2, out for 2, pause for a second. Slow breathing then goes in for 3 and out for 3 and pause for a second. And then we go to even slower breathing, which is in for 4 and out for 5 and then pause for a second. So that generally helps to take people into a slower pattern. What I find is useful is to do a head nod to encourage the breathing to slow down without forcing it, because anytime we start focusing on our breathing, we can end up putting more stress and tension into the process, and that's really not what we want. We're trying to reduce that stress. So if you look up towards the ceiling as you breathe in, and make sure you're not going dizzy or lightheaded, and count for 4. I like to do in for 4 and out for 4 as you breathe out and look down, and then pause for a second or 2 at the bottom, and then breathe in 2, 3, 4 and out 2, 3, 4, pause 2 and in 2, 3, 4 and out 2, 3, 4, pause 2 and in 2, 3, 4 and out 2, 3, 4, pause 2 and in 2, 3, 4 and out 2, 3, 4, pause 2, and we do that sort of 8 to 10 times just to try and bring the breathing into a nice slow gentle rhythm. Now For some people, they still find it difficult to keep their breathing slow. So we just encourage them to keep doing that head nod to kind of just keep the rhythm nice and relaxed. And it just helps to avoid any anxiety or panic states that might ensue if they were breathing too slowly or slower than what they used to. And that's so also the thing that I find really helpful is that when you breathe out, if you're just doing normal slow breathing, once you've slowed it down with the head movement, is at the end of the exhale, you just pause and you wait for your body to want to take that next breath in. And as you do that, you kind of begin to watch your breath breathing itself rather than you actively breathing your breath. You're taking yourself more into a meditative state. So you take an active inhale, but the exhale is completely passive and soft. And then pause at the end of the out breath, wait for the body to want to take that next breath in, and then the body will just naturally do that. And then you're breathing out and letting go and pausing at the end of the exhale, waiting for your body to take that next in breath. So it's almost like you begin to float on your breath. And that's a really lovely way to just calm everything down and just find your center and find that stillness in the pause at the end of the out breath. What I also like to do at the end of that exhale, in that pause, is to imagine my heart space opening and expanding. And you can begin to feel a really lovely warm sensation begin to spread from your chest and through your whole body as you relax and soften into the center of your heart. So that's a really lovely exercise that you can do. As we take the exercises over the 4-week period, we go from slow breathing to even slower breathing and very reduced breathing. So we also start to reduce the volume down. So you get to a point where you almost feel like you're not even efforting at breathing at all. You're hardly breathing, but that can be a really, really beautifully relaxing space to get to. But it's not something we can jump to. It's something that comes with time and with practice. And then what we tend to do every couple of minutes is something called a control pause. So this enables the background level of CO2 to build in the tissues. So we're breathing a normal breath in, a normal breath out, and then we pause and we're holding the nose during this pause. This is a longer pause than we do at the end of a normal exhale. And we're counting how many seconds we can comfortably pause for. Now we've already trained to do that a little bit just by doing the nip and nod, because we know we can pause for at least 3 or 4 seconds just by doing that nip and nod exercise. So that gives you some courage to know that you can at least pause for 3 or 4 seconds without causing any unnecessary stress. And the idea of the control pause is not just building the background CO2, but if you're prone to feeling anxiety or panic or an asthma attack, it's kind of mimicking that feeling of a little bit of air hunger, so that your body starts to, or you start to learn how to relax into that feeling of a little bit of air hunger without tensing against it, noticing where you'd need to soften in your body to allow that pause to go on for a little bit longer. So we're just retraining that drive to breathe. So everything's starting to calm down and the brainstem's getting used to that slightly higher level of CO2, a more optimal 6%. And so if you want to try that with me, so just and as long as you don't have any sort of serious medical health issues, if you do, then I would just suggest perhaps pause for no more than 4 or 5 seconds. If you've got anything that has been on the list that I've mentioned already, like heart disease, thyroid problems, diabetes, kidney issues, stomach ulcers, things like that, then we wouldn't be wanting to do any long pauses, but just to do a few seconds would be fine. So as long as you're in a relatively healthy range, then you can just take a normal breath in, normal breath out, hold your nose and count how many seconds roughly you can pause for. And then when you feel you need to breathe in, just let go of your nose and just resume your normal breathing. Now, you don't want to be gasping for breath at the end of that. You want to be able to resume completely relaxed breathing. That's sort of in for 4, out for 6, which is where I tend to kind of practice the most in that space. Common mistakes that people make is that they hold for too long and then they take this massive big breath before they return to normal breathing, or they pause at the end of the in-breath. Now, the reason why we pause at the end of the exhale is that as you breathe in, everything tenses, and as we breathe out, everything relaxes. So just breathing out before you do the control pause, so your body is soft and relaxed, will enhance that relaxation response. Whereas if we're holding it as we breathe in, that's what we normally do when we're stressed. If we're feeling emotional, even if we're crying, a lot of people kind of like try and hold themselves together and stop themselves breaking down into tears. And in doing so, they're actually keeping the emotional tension stuck in the body. Whereas if they just breathe through what they were feeling, it would just enable it to shift through really easily and really rapidly, in a very kind of more manageable way. And then the mistakes that people make are breathing too far out. So you've got a very, very empty lung cage and you feel like you're concaving, and that's really creating a lot of tension in the body too. And then it's creating very disordered breathing afterwards. We don't want to do that. And breathing in too much. So you can obviously take a much longer control pause if you have a very big breath to begin with. So we want to make sure that when we're doing a control pause, we have a sort of standardized normal breath before we do that, so that we're kind of comparing like with like throughout the exercise. So, and before I go into that, what we'd normally do as a set of exercises to begin with would be normal breathing, so nice slow nose breathing, breathing into the belly, and just putting your hand on your tummy and making sure it's your tummy that's rising and falling, not your chest that's rising and falling. We don't want it to be up here, we want to be filling from the bottom upwards, and we breathe like that for 1 to 2 minutes, and at the end of a couple of minutes we would take a normal size breath in, normal size breath out, hold the nose, do a control pause. When you feel that first feeling of discomfort, that little bit of air hunger, you would just breathe in again and resume another couple of minutes of nice relaxed slow breathing into the belly through the nose. We repeat that process 5 to 10 times depending on how long you've got, so about 20 minutes, just to help the retraining process. So that's the daily practice, and we do that 3 times a day. Ideally, most people don't manage that, but even if you do it twice a day, then you're going to still see some significant improvement in your health. So the other thing that they found is that coherent breathing is another method of breathing similar to the Buteyk process. They don't do the control pauses, but they do breathe for sort of a 10-second breath. So that in for 4 and out for 6 that I use with Buteyk, they do in for 5 and out for 5. I like to use the in for 4 and out for 6 because you're getting a slightly longer exhale, and as we know, in that exhale we relax more. And because Buteyk is geared more towards asthmatics, and basically they tend to be more in an inspiratory state, so a bit sort of stressed and kind of like that, so they need to practice letting go with the out breath so that the chest relaxes. Whereas if it's just for basic stress reduction and helping with anxiety or panic states, and just bringing your breathing to a nice regulated in for 5 and out for 5, which is still a 10-second breath, they've found that that brings the nervous system into optimal relaxation. If you can get to in for 6 and out for 6, that's also fine, but there isn't much benefit in going any slower than that. We do need some oxygen to come in. We don't want to be gasping and going blue. So that's coherent breathing. Now, the other additional thing that I wanted to bring in this evening, and when I've gone through this, then we can go through a little guided meditation using this breath. It's called Ujjayi breathing, or which is also known as victorious breath or ocean breath, and it sounds a little bit like, you probably guessed it, Darth Vader. And you know, that sort of slightly gasping, it's not a gasping breath, it's more a very controlled, I don't know how to describe the sound of the breath. It's very, very breathy, isn't it, how Darth Vader would breathe. So I also call it dragon breathing because I often use it to help release anger and frustration. And if I imagine that being like fire in the belly, and often if we're peace-loving people, we tend to sit on our anger and frustration quite a lot and bottle it up in our body. So if you imagine that you've got that fire in your belly that you're wanting to sort of release so that you can come back to a real true sense of peace rather than just putting a lid on it, then we're imagining breathing that fire out of our bellies and out through our nostrils. And what we do to help get you into this breath is to imagine you're exhaling as though you're misting up a mirror. So if you were to go, or maybe steaming up your glasses to give them a wipe, and that sound at the back of your throat, where you're slightly constricting the back of your throat to make that ha sound. That's the sound we're making basically. But rather than doing it with your mouth open, you're doing it with your mouth closed. So you're making that sound through your nose and you're gently pushing from your belly. So normal relaxed breathing is it's passive. So you don't do anything actively with your muscles to breathe out. So as you breathe in, your diaphragm descends and it draws your lungs with it, so they expand. And as you breathe out, everything just recoils naturally. But with the Ujjayi breath, you're basically doing a slightly constricted back of the throat, and as you breathe out, you're gently pushing from your belly as though your navel is going back towards your spine. So you make that sound of constriction in your throat, but you're breathing in and out through your nose. And in time, you can make that sound on the inhale also. If you do it wrong, it'll just create kind of weird, slightly strangled sounds in the throat. So just have a play around with it. It's quite fun to get into it. And if you've got the hang of it ahead of it any time that you feel anxious or frustrated about life's events, then when you get to a point where you are feeling like steam's coming out of your ears and you need to vent, then you've got it already under your hat as a method that you can use. I find it particularly useful to go and sit on the loo and do that kind of breathing if I'm feeling annoyed, because your body's already in that letting go mode, and I think that's quite a useful way to go about processing things. So we have a willingness to let them go. So you make the breathing slow on inspiration and expiration. So we're still aiming to do that sort of in for 4 and out for 6. I find it particularly helpful if there is a sort of mathematic tendency there to be able to do that, because it can enable you to breathe without the wheeze happening. And you're breathing deep into your belly on the inhale and drawing the tummy back towards the spine on the exhale. So I don't know whether that sound is coming through, whether I'm beginning to sound like I've joined the dark side or not, but if you want to have a go at home, just see if you can. Imagine that you're breathing that fire out of your belly and through your nose. The other thing is obviously that it's known as ocean breath. So if you're just wanting to do it as a really nice meditative way of calming everything down in your body, it begins to sound like the waves rolling up the beach. So as you breathe in, the waves kind of retreating. As you breathe out, the wave is crashing, rolling up the long beach and dispersing the intensity of that emotion as it goes. So yeah, you can almost imagine you're listening to the waves, and I imagine that those waves washing up and down through my body and washing away any tension or stress as I do that. And within 2 or 3 minutes, you can have quite a significant change in how you're feeling. So I actually utilize that to overcome an asthma attack in 3 minutes without any medication. You know, you could do it for 10 to 20 minutes, but I did it for 3 with a pause to do a very mini 2 to 3 second control pause between each minute of Ujjayi breathing. And by the 3rd minute, I went into a complete surrender at the end of that exhale in the control pause. And the way I would describe surrender in that instance is that it's not a giving up or a giving in. It's a not wanting it to be any different from how it's showing up. When we go into that complete surrender, there's something quite magical that happens in the body where we let go in a deeper way. So what we tend to do with dynamic breath release is that we pause at the end of your out breath once every minute, and we focus on breathing into any areas of tension in the body and welcoming them with a willingness to let them go and relax. And then we imagine we can draw once we've released that tension out and we're feeling more calm and clear, we can imagine a funnel in the crown of our head, and we can imagine breathing down into our body any new inner resources that might be beneficial to us. So I like to think if I've had an episode where I felt angry or annoyed about something, that I imagine that and once that's cleared out, that I breathe peace in the place of that. So whatever the opposite is, if you imagine the opposite polarity to what you've been experiencing, and you're bringing that in once you've got a clear space to do that. So the process that I like to take people through is to get you to feel your feet on the ground. You scan your body and let any areas of tension soften. And then you focus on an issue that you'd like to resolve. And you notice where you feel it. Now, it might be an all over feeling, or you might feel a knot in your tummy, or you might feel tension in your shoulders. And then imagine, say, if you've got tension in your chest, you might breathe underneath that. So you're breathing into your belly, and then you're sending the tension up and out through the top of your head with an eye roll. So you're looking up to the crown of your head and sending the tension out of your head on the out breath. And then once you feel that that issue has shifted, then we return to quiet, peaceful nose breathing. And in the pause at the end of the out breath, we're receiving that lovely, whatever inner resource it is that we feel would benefit from. Do we have any questions at all? Before Thomas has said, why is it that when I start focusing on my breathing, do I feel like I'm breathing more and it is harder to control? Well, I think if you're actually actively engaged with your breathing, you are controlling it more anyway. And I think any time where we're switching from it being an automatic process to a conscious process, there's going to be some kind of tension which won't feel quite as natural. And that's where we're trying to train you into doing those pauses at the end of the exhale. So there are very few automatic functions. You might remember back to that slide where I showed you all the different organs and all the different connections from the spine and the sympathetic nerves. Now, there are only two functions in our body that are both under our conscious control and automatic or autonomic control. And they're our breathing and our bladder. So your breathing, you can both breathe consciously or unconsciously. Thankfully, if we don't breathe at all, we'll definitely go unconscious. But yeah, there is an element that we can take over our breathing, but we wouldn't be able to do that all the time because obviously we wouldn't be able to focus on much else. And the nice thing about breathing consciously is that you are more aware of how you're feeling and how you're thinking, but it will tend to make your mind go quite quiet because your brain has got that single point of focus. So I think the main thing is not to effort at the breathing too much and not to get too involved in it. It's almost like stepping back from it a little bit if you're feeling that it's harder to control. So that's where breathing out and pausing, waiting for your body to take the breath in is really helpful, because you're actually allowing it to switch more into the automatic control rather than your active control. I hope that answers the question a little bit. With the bladder, the voiding of the bladder is the other thing that is under autonomic control and conscious control. So we can decide to hold on and go, there is no loo nearby just at the moment. But apparently we can only do that 3 or 4 times. So we don't want to hold off on that one for too long. Thankfully, our breathing's a little different. So we can, to a degree, with meditation also become more able to control our heart rate. But that is just a kind of a sideline to the fact that we're just generally relaxing anyway. So we could probably think about things that would rev up our heart rate, and maybe think about things that would calm down our heart rate, but we're not as able to actively take control of our heartbeat as we are with our breathing. So that's just a little kind of. Were there any other questions? I think there might have been one more that popped up on the screen. So Jonathan's put, when I'm training on the spin cycle and focus on nose breathing, sometimes I tend to get a lot of fluid through my nose and have to resort back to fusing nose and mouth. Is this common? Yes, it is. One of the ways in which our body tries to prevent hyperventilation is that it lays down more mucus and constricts the airways to slow the overbreathing down. So it may be that it needs to moderate that. Now, we tend to, in the later stages, once we've mastered the nose breathing at rest, we would take nose breathing into exercise. And what we tend to do is start by walking for 20 minutes with nose breathing. And if we get out of breath, then just stop, wait for our body to be able to regain nose breathing and regain our breath, and then continue on. We don't want to be pushing yourself into a stress response by trying to kind of just constantly nose breathe. And eventually you might be able to take that into a bit of a run, but because there's a greater oxygen demand in the tissues, and because there's more carbon dioxide made when we're exercising, we will need to blow that out more. But it's just a case of trying to get that regulation right. So what I do in clinic is I have a capno trainer where we can actually measure your end tidal CO2, which is equal, the amount of CO2 that you're breathing out is equal to the amount of CO2 in your blood vessels. And that would be able to tell us how well oxygenated you are, because there's an optimal point of 40 millimeters of mercury of CO2 that we can measure, whether you're above or below that line. And it'd be interesting to see how that changed as you exercise, as to whether there may be some hyperventilation happening. But what you would do would be to switch from nose, so in through the nose and out through the nose, to in through the nose, out through the mouth, before you go to mouth, mouth. So it does take practice. Some marathon runners manage to do nose breathing consistently, but they wouldn't get to that automatically. It would be something you would work up to gradually. So I hope that answers your question, Jonathan. But it's just the body's laying down mucus as a way of slowing that over breathing down. Great. Yeah, great. Imagine an issue that you'd like to work on. If there's anything that's nothing too big, let's just choose something that's sort of a moderate issue, so that you're not creating any unnecessary stress for your system, because obviously I'm not there to hold and support the space for you as I would in person. But if there's something that's been niggling you, a bit of annoyance, something that's be nice if it resolved in your life, if you just call that into mind. And as you do that, just scan your body and see if you notice any tension or holding stress patterns. So maybe there's an ache somewhere, or a bit of a discomfort, and you might even not know what it's related to, and it doesn't really matter. So just bring your awareness to any areas of tension or stress in your body. Just very gently bring your awareness to your breath, and breathing down into your belly. And with every out breath, you're just letting that tension and stress dissolve and melt. Bringing your awareness down into your feet. It's really good to start with grounding your energy, so you're feeling connected to the earth underneath you. And you can imagine just breathing in and out through the soles of your feet, breathing any tension or any stress out of your feet and into the earth, letting it just dissolve, melt, release. And then just bringing your awareness into your calves. Imagine you can breathe into your calves, energizing your body, and as you're breathing out, just letting any stress or tension drain out, letting go, releasing. That's it. Bringing your awareness to your knees and breathing into your knees. Fresh energy. And letting a wave of tension drain out of your knees down into the earth. And bring your awareness to your thighs. Breathing into your thighs. And breathing out and letting go of any stress. Just letting the front of your thighs melt into the back of your thighs. Softening, releasing, unwinding. And if you feel able to do a control pause, just taking a normal sized breath into your tummy through your nose, normal sized breath out, and holding your nose and that pause for as long as is comfortable for you. So don't push it, and just waiting for your body to take a breath in when it's ready. And then just bringing your awareness back into that nice, slow, gentle breathing, noticing that as you breathe out, there's a natural pause at the end of the exhale. And then the body will naturally want to breathe in easily and effortlessly. Letting go with every exhale. Drawing fresh energy in as your body naturally breathes in. So you're not forcing it, you're just allowing that breath to breathe itself. As you breathe up into your pelvis. And letting your hips and pelvis soften as you breathe out and let go. And breathing down into your abdomen, letting all your lower abdominal organs soften as you relax. Bringing your awareness to the upper abdomen organs, and stomach and liver, spleen. Liver and spleen are still within your rib cage, so just gently breathing into your belly. And as you breathe out, just letting those lower ribs and upper abdomen areas soften and melt, letting go of any unnecessary nervous tension. Letting it just dissolve, release. And when you're ready, taking a normal sized breath in, normal sized breath out, and if you feel able to do another controlled pause, just holding your nose, waiting for your body to want to take that next breath in, and then letting go when you're ready. Resuming natural, relaxed breathing, allowing yourself to just float on your breath. Effortless ease all the way through. And if there was any tension, any frustrations going on in your life, any residual fire or discomfort in your belly, just imagine that you can take that Ujjayi breath into your belly. And making that ha sound as you breathe out through your nose, releasing that tension that's no longer needed. Drawing from the energy that was suppressed and compressed into that area. Imagine as it releases anything that no longer serves you, it's flooding you with more energy, more life force. All the life force that's been held down in that area of your body. Any internal tension or any internal criticisms that we've been holding towards ourselves. Not good enough, should have tried harder, if only. Anything that's not been serving you, just breathing it out. With that more dynamic breath. When you feel you can't focus or hold that idea or that emotion anymore, just allow your body to come back to that gentle, peaceful, relaxing breath. As we feel our lungs draw down as we breathe naturally into our belly. And as we breathe out, just softening into the center of your heart space. And very soon you might begin to feel a warm sensation spreading from your chest, down through your arms to your fingertips, down through your body to your toes. And in that pause at the end of your exhale, allowing your heart space to open and expand even more, wide enough to welcome whatever emotions you've been feeling lately. Unconditional love for you, just as you are, without you having to be any different. You're always doing the best you can in each and every moment. Nobody can ask any more of you than that. And just letting your shoulders melt and release. And when you're ready, just taking another normal sized breath in, normal sized breath out, and holding your nose and just pausing for as long as is comfortable. Noticing where you have to relax into to enable yourself to expand that pause a little bit longer. Where is that feeling of air hunger and drive to breathe arising from? How can you relax and soften into that space? That's lovely, good. And just naturally allowing the breath to return when you're ready. And imagine your breath like the waves gently rolling up the beach. Washing away any toxicity or stress from your whole body and being. Letting your neck melt. Let your head drop into your heart space. So you're not carrying any tension in your neck or shoulders. Just letting all of that dissolve. As you sink into your bottom, you'll notice that your neck and shoulders relax even more fully. And just letting go of any tension in your jaw, teeth, tongue. And sometimes there's even some hidden tension in the roof of your mouth. If you imagine the roof of your mouth just softening and widening, it's opening up the base of the skull, allowing even your brain to relax. As you continue just to watch your breath, noticing any areas of resistance in your body, and imagine you just breathing that love from your heart, welcoming any areas of tension so that they can just be so acknowledged and heard, and imagine you surrounding them in a loving, welcoming and embrace, a little bit like you would if you were holding a baby that was crying. Because within all of us there are parts of us that are unheard and unacknowledged. And the parts of us that are crying for attention or discomfort are often the bits that we push away and make wrong. So just welcoming those parts back with open arms, sending them your love, letting them relax, so that your whole body is just feeling much softer and more relaxed now all the way through. And you can even just imagine going into the left hemisphere of your brain. And if there's any tension or holding in there, just imagine it like a clenched fist opening out. And just breathing into the right hemisphere of your brain, just noticing how it feels in there by comparison. And if there is any tension in there, just imagine it again like a clenched fist opening out, or petals of a flower unfurling, releasing. And then bring yourself back to center. Back into your heart space. Hopefully feeling more resourced, more refreshed, relaxed. And we'll just do one final control pause. So if you just take a normal sized breath in, normal sized breath out, and just letting go in that pause, softening through the whole of your body as you hold your nose. And when you need to resume your breathing, just simply let go and allow that breath to easily and effortlessly come back in. And imagine that funnel in the crown of your head opening up, and you can ask your higher self to give you a download into your body, into your being, of any inner resource that you might feel would benefit you right now. It could be anything of your choosing, or you could just ask and see what is given. It might be a word that bubbles up, or a feeling, but imagine that funnel, drawing into your body, into your head, down through your neck, into your heart, and from your heart spreading through your whole body. It might be something like confidence or courage. It might be just more unconditional love for you, just as you are. It might be peace, a feeling of ease, or just allowing your whole body to deeply rest. And in that pause at the end of each and every out-breath, just softening into your heart space, completely letting go into that relaxation. Knowing that in that relaxation, this is where your body starts to heal and release anything that doesn't serve it. And once that healing's taken place, you'll feel refreshed, revitalized, renewed, re-energized, reinvigorated, restored, brought back to your full vitality and wellness. And so when you're ready, just bringing your awareness back to your breath again, back to sitting on the chair, feeling your feet on the floor, still just noticing your breath, easily and effortlessly breathing itself, with gratitude for all that you are and all that is yet to be. You can open your eyes when you're ready. And coming back to the room, or the virtual room. So, I don't know whether any of you noticed any changes in the length of the control pause that you could do as you went through that, and whether your breathing began to slow down. I'm just going to do a final screen share. So we might want to just count how many breaths a minute we're taking now. So I'm just going to, there'll be a traffic light countdown, red to green, and when it goes to green, then that's when you start your count. So your breaths per minute is an in-breath and an out-breath counts as 1. So when you're ready, 3, 2, 1, go. And no efforting at the breathing, just let it happen itself. That's it. So there's your minute. So if you remember back to how many breaths you took in the minute to begin with, and just compare, see if you've have any of you sped up, or if you all hopefully slowed down. If you want to share it in the chat box, you can do. And if you have any questions, please feel free. There is my whole breathing retraining program on breathewithEase.co.uk. And so if you want to find more information, then there's the full Buteyk breathing program called the Breathe with Ease method, which I've recorded all the exercises on video, and then there are 4 weekly training programs that we go through, a guided meditation video, so it helps to pace your breathing with a circle that expands and contracts, with my guided meditation talking you through the process, and that will take you through the full 4-week program on that.